All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have this webinar today, and we certainly appreciate you joining us. The Michigan Paralyzed Veterans of America is proud to host the second webinar focusing on issues surrounding the ADA. We're so fortunate that this webinar is funded in part by the Great Lakes ADA Center, in addition to having both the Brain Injury Association of Michigan and the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living join us as contributors. At this time, we'd like to ask you to please mute your microphones if you have not done so already. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat box or to hold questions until the end when we'll open up the floor. I would like to now introduce our speakers and collaborators. I would first like to start with introducing Robin Bennett, who is MPVA's development coordinator. Robin has been instrumental in seeking out grant funds for this webinar and putting together its content. Robin has spent years supporting the MPVA both as a team member and a volunteer. Next, I would like to recognize Michael Harris as MPVA's president and as someone who has been with the organization since 1996. Mike has served as government relations director, former executive director, and now president of the organization. As a paralyzed veteran, Michael lives the MPVA's mission and has become an outstanding advocate and has helped so many throughout the state with ADA issues. Next, I'd like to introduce Nicole Shotwell from the Brain Injury Association of Michigan. Nicole is their vice president of programs and operations. Nicole has been with BIAMI for 6 years and is responsible for the organization's programs and has done a spectacular job in ensuring BIAMI's mission of enhancing the lives of those with brain injuries throughout the state of Michigan. Next is Elliot Carter, the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living's Advocacy and Technology Access Program coordinator. Elliot has been with the organization for 2 years and has been responsible for the distribution of over 100 tablets to seniors and people with disabilities throughout Washtenaw, Livingston, and Monroe counties. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Brenda Weeder as a contributor to this webinar. Brenda is the MPVA's administrative assistant. Brenda has been with the organization for 9 years, and she has an uncanny ability to keep us all organized and sane. I'd now like to hand off to Robin Bennett.
Thank you, Jacqueline. All right, let's jump in. I'm Robin Bennett, as Jacqueline said, and I am proud to start us off. Forgive me if I get a little out of breath. From time to time, my disability tends to do that, as I'm sure many of you understand. Okay, so basically there are 2 important terms that we're going to be going over today. They're related, but also very distinctive terms. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk, that we'll talk about each of them in turn and give examples. All right, so the first term is digital accessibility. Digital accessibility is the process of making digital products accessible to everyone. It is about providing all users access to the same information, regardless of the impairments they may have. So basically, digital accessibility is access to anything on the internet. And we'll be going through some examples in the next few slides. The next term is assistive technology. The Assistive Technology Act defines assistive technology as any item, piece of equipment, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. We'll be also hitting that topic more in depth a bit later. But basically, AT or assistive technology is anything usually tangible that you may use as a person with any variety of disability to access whatever functions of life, whether work, school, leisure, civic, anything that you may use to access that world more independently. Next slide, please, Jacqueline. Okay, so digital accessibility. Who is it for and why? Is it Enginous in Science tells us in Disability Accessibility, Digital Accessibility 101, that we are living in a digital world where more and more products and services are becoming digital. Organizations that neglect accessibility need to understand that they're already losing customers and will continue to lose them. Plus, good usability improves the digital experience for all users, not only those with health conditions and disabilities. So basically, it's saying, in short, that as we've seen with things like curb cuts or push buttons on doors, making accessibility improvements is good for all. It's good for every user, whether they have a health condition, disability, or not. So this is an important thing as the world's becoming more and more focused on internet-based technologies. Some things that are included in digital accessibility that you may see when you go on a website, they might have alternative text on images, screen reader compatibility, closed captioning on videos, or text size options. And those are just a few of the examples. There are many, and we will talk with, there are some of them on our resource slide that you can look at to learn more about that. Next slide. Okay, how is digital accessibility managed? Basically, WC3, the World Wide Web Consortium, is the organization that manages web standards. Now it is supported by the ADA, as the ADA is basically everything access for people with disabilities. So, but the WC3 is the organization that kind of oversees what those standards are, and it has many resources. It is available on a valuable link slide at the end of this presentation, so you can check out all its resources. Next slide. Okay, now let's move on to AT. Why is it important and who is it for? The ADA raised the bar for home and community-based services, HCBS, to include provisions when possible to cover the purchase of AT, then make it possible for an individual to live more independently within their home community. Now, that was from the National Disability Institute when they specifically wrote about this in their online article, the ADA paving the way for assistive technology. Can you tell where we got the title for this webinar? So basically that's saying that there are many definitions, but there is one purpose. It's technology that serves the user to live as independently as possible, to be able to access their world and in every variety that it comes in. Now, it varies by need, ability, and a number of other factors. And everything under the sun, there's so much out there, and we'll go over that in more detail. Next slide, please. Now, how is assistive technology managed? Basically, the Assistive Technology Act, which we already talked about a little bit, it, as amended, it sets standards and supports for AT, for assistive tech. Now, as I said, it is built on the ADA as everything that is about access for people with disabilities tends to point back and be founded on the ADA. Now, the guidelines on AT can be accessed online through a social service agency or from a supporter peer group or a medical office event. It's anybody that helps you with anything related to your disability should be able to give you information on assistive technology, like the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living, the Brain Injury Association of Michigan, or the Michigan Paralyzed Veterans of America. We can all help as well. Next slide. Okay, the bottom line for each of these terms. Digital accessibility's bottom line, as supported by the ADA, is to provide vital, it's proving vital as the way of society, employment, commerce, and more becomes increasingly internet-based, especially because of and in the wake of the pandemic of 2020. It is vital that all are able to access the digital landscape. I think we all have our own stories about what accessing digital accessibility meant to us during this pandemic experience. Accessing information, being able to talk to family, telehealth visits, and being able to access it in a way that works for us and with our abilities and our individual needs. Okay, so assistive tech. The ADA considers assistive technology as part of reasonable accommodations under Title I employment. It also supports its broad-based technologies as an important part of community-based and independent right. Now, I myself, having a disability and being a wheelchair user for the past 20 years, giving away my age there, sorry about that. I've used AT in school, in employment, and in my personal life, in my personal computer, in my home with my wheelchair, with my technology, my tech gadgets to help me access doing things more independently. And when it's been done, when I've done it within the context of employment, it's always the person with the disability's job. And it is your responsibility to bring up to an employer that you have a reasonable accommodation in order to perform the required job duties sufficiently. So for me, that meant a speech to text software. I always say that backwards, so I wanted to make sure I said it right. So what I do is there's software that I speak and it records what I'm saying and turns that into the text on screen, whether I'm writing a document or a grant or an email, which I do those things a lot. So I had to approach, for instance, the Michigan Paralyzed Veterans of America. Wherever you are, it's either going to be your boss or it's going to be the HR department. And they're going to want it in writing because the ADA does specify that any reasonable accommodations need to be in writing. So, but communicate with them on what works best for you and what's going to unlock your access to be able to do your job to the best of your ability. So I think at this point, I am going to ask Michael Harris, the president of Michigan Paralyzed Veterans of America, to discuss a little bit more about tax incentives involving AT.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as Robin indicated, there are tax credits available to small businesses for complying with ADA. It was one of the provisions they included because businesses were complaining back in the day prior to the passage of the ADA that it was an unfunded mandate. So what they decided to do was assist them to help them offset the costs of implementing the requirements by including tax incentives. But when it comes to tax incentives, unfortunately, the majority of businesses aren't even aware that they're available. In fact, whenever we as an organization over the years have filed complaints with businesses, not only do we define the issue or the violation, but we also include tax incentives so we can make them aware that these are available. So we're trying to be proactive. And so it's really important for people when they seek employment that, as Robin indicated in her, in her presentation, that you let the employer know that these incentives are available and that you're effectively able to communicate what changes are needed so they can make sure that they can help you meet what the job requirements are with the technologies that are out there. So yeah, Robin did a really good job of really documenting that. There are two tax credits that are available. One's a tax credit, and it's available for any small business that earns less than $1 million in revenue or has 30 or less full-time employees can receive up to a $5,000 tax credit for all eligible expenditures. And the tax credits can be used for both assistive technology and the physical environment. And when I say physical environment, I'm meaning like door openers to get into the building. If it doesn't have handicap parking spots, it can provide those, make the bathroom accommodating so you can actually use it, or if it has steps getting into the building, they can build a ramp for you. So that's what I mean by the physical environment. And then there's tax incentives, or I mean tax deductions, and that can be applied by businesses of all sizes. And what that does is each year they can deduct up to $15,000 for each taxable years that they spend money to make their business meet the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that with that being said, I will turn it back over.
Thank you, Michael. I did forget to mention that it is an employer's responsibility to really write a very detailed job description and really make sure they have hit all of those areas of the required job duties so that a prospective employee can really start to think about, okay, what sort of reasonable accommodations would I need to be able to do this job? And so that really helps with moving forward with employment. Next slide, Jacqueline. Okay, so I love this slide. Examples of assistive tech. There are a lot of really good things out there. There are thousands of devices and gadgets available, ranging from complex to simple, like a power wheelchair. They do everything except microwave your burrito. And that could be coming soon. I've tried them. I see that around the corner. I would love that. They're considered very complex. They can do a lot of different things. And then there are very simple gadgets out there, such as canes to help support an individual as they're walking. The whole point is you being able to access things independently, whether you need something more complex to do those things for you or simple. So there's emerging smart home and app-based technologies that are growing. They're the fastest. Things like the smart speakers, smartphone apps that help you turn on lights, help you adjust your thermostat, things like that. And of course, wireless and broadband can be a critical piece, not only of this newer technology, but of all technology. And being able to access that often starts with the wireless and the broadband issues. Next slide. Okay, so that brings us to what accessibility challenges exist with these mediums. Because there are challenges. There's socioeconomic status, geographic region, awareness of resources, and many more. And we are happy to have partners who have worked on gathering information on those challenges. Next slide. So I would like to introduce Nicole Shotwell from the Brain Injury Association of Michigan to introduce our next slides and lead this discussion on the challenges that exist with these mediums.
Thanks, Robin. I appreciate the nice introduction. You know, as a nonprofit organization that serves survivors of brain injury in the state of Michigan, we take access to our programs and services to heart. So last March, when the state went into quarantine because of COVID, we quickly acted and migrated all of our programs to a virtual format. So this included educational opportunities, social opportunities, as well as our chapters and support groups. But as we did that, we really came to the realization that not everyone that we serve has the ability or the access to be able to participate in these programs. So we decided that what we needed to do is really understand the problem a little bit better before we could start acting to solve it. Jacqueline, can you forward to the next slide, please? In order to do this, we created a survey, which we distributed by snail mail, which is one of the most low-tech things you can do. But in order to understand technology, that's what you have to do, right? So we sent all of the people in our database a survey and started with the question of, does your home have internet access? We wanted to understand at the very least if they had the ability to access the internet. As you can see, the overwhelming majority of folks do, in fact, have the ability to access the internet. At least they have it in their home. Next slide, please, Jacqueline. The next question, of course, was related to a device that's capable of accessing the internet, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, etc. And again, as you can see by the chart, the majority of folks do have a tablet. Next slide, please. So one of the questions we also wanted to know is, we wanted to understand, okay, so if you have access to technology, you have a device, you have internet, but are you comfortable? Do you feel confident and comfortable in utilizing either of those? And that's where things started to deviate a little bit. So again, it was still the majority of people felt that they were pretty comfortable to extremely comfortable being able to access the internet from their device. But yeah, we still have had about 35% of folks who were just not quite comfortable yet. Next slide, please. And finally, one of the biggest questions we wanted to know is, how would you be interested in using a device for virtual activities? And part of the reason for that, quite frankly, is for grant funding. If we could say that we know that individuals needed to have access to technology to, as we see on this chart, access telehealth appointments, that would be a pretty compelling reason for a grantor to give us some assistance in helping the people that we serve access. So again, as you can see, we ask questions about social events, our fall conference, our chapters and support groups, other educational events, and telehealth appointments. And telehealth appointments with healthcare providers was overwhelmingly the highest point of interest for any of the people that we surveyed. That was really, really important to them. So right now where we stand is, we've just completed the survey, we've digested some of this, and now it's to look at grant funds and look at community partners and how to bridge that gap and how to bring the programs that we serve, as well as opportunities for telehealth and other necessary accessing points to bring it to the people that we serve. So I would like to now turn this over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit about a broadband bill, which quite honestly will really help us as an organization and help other folks with disabilities. If this could pass, it would really help with the accessibility when it comes to the internet. So Mike, if you'd like to share a little bit about the broadband bill, take it away.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Yeah, one of the positives that really has happened within the last 6 months, there haven't been too many positives with what we've been going through with the pandemic, is the fact that when they introduced the infrastructure legislation probably about 3-4 months ago, the White House did, it included broad coverage for broadband services, which I never anticipated would be in a transportation bill, but it makes sense now when you look back at it. But yeah, it was the legislation was introduced in the Senate. They took it up, they passed it really on bipartisan basis. And I just found out a couple of days ago, the House is going to take it up when they come back from summer recess, and is expected to pass the House. And once that takes place, the president has indicated he will sign it. And when you look at COVID-19 and the pandemic, it's really made it clear and obvious that broadband is essential for nearly every aspect of daily life, from remote schooling, basic business transactions, and telemedicine, which I have personally found as a godsend. Telemedicine, I have probably cut about 4 to 5 hours out of a normal doctor's visit by being able to access my doctors, but through video conferencing, and they enjoy it. It's usually a 15-minute visit and it's done with. And so this is going to be here even after pandemic is no longer an issue. And I've already indicated to my physicians that I prefer this means of meeting with them instead of having to travel to the outpatient clinic. And most jobs today require internet connections. Our economy really can't function without it. So having access to broadband is critical going forward for people to really survive in the world that exists today. But it's when I was investigating this issue, the one thing that really surprised me was that there are 30 million Americans that live in areas where there's no broadband infrastructure to provide acceptable speed and access to the internet. In fact, the White House has indicated that there's about 400,000 people living in Michigan that has no broadband access. And so the legislation, once passed, will provide $100 million to the state of Michigan so they can expand access to high-speed broadband internet to people without it. And so what that will do is help them to buy the necessary equipment that's necessary for people that can't afford it, such as laptops and tablets. And it will provide subsidies to help low-income families offset the costs of paying for their Wi-Fi connection, and also provide training for people that need training in learning how to access the internet and how to properly use it. That's something I wouldn't be surprised if I end up taking advantage of. I'm very, I have no problem admitting that that I have a long ways to go to understand all the capabilities that come along with using today's technology, but I'm not the only one, and there's a lot of us that fall in that category. So really the good news is that you know, that this is going to happen sooner than later, and that hopefully a year from now, when we're having the same conversation, that communities will be able to have access to something that, as you know, I've always taken for granted because I've always had access to it. So for those without it, it's almost like losing my electricity, like I did a couple of weeks ago. You know, until you lose it, you don't really realize the value of it. And so this is really a good thing to come out of the pandemic, is that they're finally going to address the deficiencies in the broadband for people that don't currently have it. So I'll pass it back to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Michael. We would now like to hear from Elliot Carter from the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living to talk about their technology access program.
All right, thanks, Jacqueline. You can just go on to the next slide now. So as Robin mentioned earlier, tablets and other similar internet-enabled devices really represent this new fast-growing arena when it comes to assistive technology. They're very readily available. Any major electronics retailer should have them available at a variety of price points. And I refer to it as an arena for assistive tech because tablets themselves can be the assistive tech or the device on which the AT is used. For example, what I'm talking about is there are apps such as Augmentative Alternative Communication, or AAC boards, which help nonverbal individuals communicate, that can appear on tablets and can be used from a tablet. And we're also seeing more and more accessibility features coming standard with tablets, such as screen readers, as Robin mentioned earlier. Beyond this, there are also smart devices, which I will also cover later in this presentation. If we can move on, please. So the Technology Access Program, or TAP as we call it, started off with a grant from the Area Agency on Aging 1B that actually initially came from the Federal Administration for Community Living. And the idea was to provide folks with disabilities in our service area, which were Washtenaw, Livingston, and Monroe counties, with tablets at no cost. And then we were later supported by the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, which provided us funds to specifically target seniors who needed access to technology. So, but for both groups, the process was basically the same. We would start off by assessing the individual's needs, not only in terms of what they needed the tablet for, but also what their social isolation was like. That was a big motivating factor when it came to the reason for both of these grants to come to us, was the issue of social isolation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We would then provide the device for free, as well as any accessories, which can also be thought of as assistive technology in and of themselves that folks would request. And this would include the physical keyboards, styluses, or computer mice. We would set up the tablets in our office. We would go through the activation process, which can be quite confusing for folks who may not be very experienced with using tablets or smartphones. And we would go in and install necessary apps such as Zoom. We would provide recommendations for apps that we found were useful, as well as promoting our own virtual activities. So it was a win for us, as we found a way to get more folks aware of the virtual offerings that we have been providing since the beginning of the pandemic, as well as giving people the device that they need to access them. And then the last portion of this program was the internet support, in which if folks indicated that they were looking for new low-cost internet options, we could have a conversation with them about what was available in their area, what the different what different speeds mean, all these confusing terms for folks who don't know a whole lot about internet, as well as providing assistance with applying to the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. And that is a program by the FCC, which is still running, but it is considered to be a pandemic-related program. It provides up to $50 off, or actually up to 75% off for those who live in tribal lands, but a monthly discount on one's internet bill if they qualify for the program. And hopefully with this broadband bill that that was mentioned earlier, we can see these types of programs become permanent and not fixed in time based on whether or not the pandemic is happening. Next slide, please. So we offer two different tablets. They were quite similar, and they were both made by Lenovo. So that means that they run on the Android operating system. The first one was the Lenovo Tab M10 FHD Plus. The 10 refers to the size of the screen. So it's about the size of your standard iPad. This is a standard tablet that has full high definition. And we also had the Lenovo Smart Tab M8. And what's unique about the Smart Tab as opposed to the regular tab is that it is able to double as a Google Nest Hub. And what this means is that it basically becomes a smart speaker. So those can be set up in the home. You see there's a little charging dock that the tablet fits into. And when it is in that dock, it allows for hands-free control of the tablet because it turns on the microphone so that it can be voice activated, similar to Amazon Echo products. And it allows for hands-free control of the tablet as well as connected smart devices that folks may have around the home. So these can include thermostats, video doorbells, as well as just even special light bulbs that are able to connect to the internet. So you can, with simply using your voice, control these devices around your home, which makes it a very attractive option for a lot of people who have limited mobility or similar concerns, but most people just want the standard no-nonsense tablet we found. Next slide, please. So there are definitely pros and cons when it comes to using smart devices as AT. I believe that we have made a huge impact so far. As of right now, we have distributed about 200 tablets into the community. We have many more people on our waiting list. And I'm very proud of the program, but I also do think that it's important to think about the different pros and cons because this seems to be the way that assistive technology is sort of heading, whether we like it or not. So starting with the pros, as I mentioned before, tablets are becoming more and more accessible. These tech companies at Google, Apple, and others are really taking care in making their products easy to use and understand, as well as containing a lot of accessibility features that don't require you to download anything else. They're just included in with the tablet. As I mentioned, the hands-free assistant and voice recognition has a lot of benefits for folks with disabilities. Because they are connected to the internet, you can easily update software when needed, as in the past, when you would get a piece of assistive technology that isn't internet enabled, in this ever-changing world, it can be essentially obsolete as soon as it gets into your hands. But with the internet connection, that allows for software updates as well as other important updates. And finally, the biggest thing is just the customizability and the range of options of how your tablet or smartphone or other device can access as, can function rather as AT. It can be a magnifier so that you can use the rear camera to greater magnify what's in front of you. It can be, as I mentioned, the AAC boards. The possibilities really are as infinite as app makers and other tech companies sort of, it's limited to basically only their imagination and ingenuity. As for the cons though, the number one actually would probably be what I put at the bottom of the slide, which is that they require a good bit of technological skill. So when you have folks who are very new to tech, which a lot of our folks are, all of the different things that sort of I take for granted as being easy to learn about a tablet are not so easy. And so it does require a good amount of background knowledge in order to use it effectively straight out of the box. And then there's also concerns over personal data. This is something that was actually brought up by one person who was interested in our tablet program, who was sort of concerned about the idea of being tracked using this, using their tablet device. And it is not totally unfounded because there are certainly security concerns. These devices like smart speakers, they require their microphone to be on all the time. And so most devices will record and even store audio for further analysis in order for the smart speakers to better understand your voice and your needs, but it's also kind of unclear as to what these tech companies are actually also doing with the data. And then there's also the vulnerability to hacking. It is an internet-enabled device, so if there was someone malicious out there who did want to take control over your device, it's much easier to do that than it is a power wheelchair, for example. And because so much of our personal data lives within tablets and on the internet, it can pose a lot of risks to the individual. Next slide. So some of the lessons that we were able to learn from the TAP program, first and foremost, completely remote tech support can be very difficult. Our building has been closed since the onset of the pandemic, except on a very, very limited basis. And so we really wanted to try and test out doing this all remotely, aside from the delivery and setting up the tablets, obviously. But in terms of the communications with the person who received the tablet, it could be, it's not always easy. We did discover the software called TeamViewer, which is a tech support app that sort of allows you to see what the person is seeing on their screen rather than them just having to explain what they think is happening on the screen to you over the phone. And that is much more helpful when it comes to providing that type of tech support. We saw our role as not being so much of a tech support based program. We just were more interested in getting people online and getting the device, and then directing folks elsewhere whenever possible to the more extensive tech support needs that people may have. Another lesson was to meet people where they are, and that includes avoiding jargon, not expecting people to know what megabits per second is when talking about internet speeds, just being very direct and explaining terms when possible, but also just meeting people where they are physically. We did door drop-offs because we know of the various concerns that people have when it comes to leaving their home, as well as the lack of transportation that a lot of folks are experiencing due to the slowdowns in transit systems due to the pandemic. We found it very helpful to leverage existing community relationships. We did our promotion for this almost entirely online at first, realizing that there was a bit of an irony there and hoping to reach the unconnected people, but by promoting it on the internet because that was the best tool that we had. But as the product grew and we had these individuals who would then go out and refer 2, 3, 4, 10 people even sometimes to the program, we got that snowball effect, which sort of allowed the awareness of the program to spread to the people who needed it. And then similarly to that, we, especially down in our Monroe office, were able to collaborate with other agencies who may have a better understanding and better connections with folks who are experiencing a lack of technology. And then some other resources that I wanted to highlight. There's the website called getsetup.io. That is managed by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and it is it's not limited to tech tutorials. There's many different types of tutorials and video lessons, but it is marketed as for seniors by seniors. Since many of our participants were older adults, we found it very helpful to have that type of resource to connect them to. Broadbandnow.com is very helpful when providing these internet support because it gives you a very clear, straightforward view over the different internet providers that are available in one zip code and the different price points that they're at. The National Digital Inclusion Alliance was a good resource to draw from when we were designing the program. And then the Michigan Assistive Technology program provided webinars and support to folks early on in the grant cycle in order to help us understand what was out there in terms of using tablets as AT, and that was also very invaluable to us. And I will hand it back over to Jacqueline at this point to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Elliot. That was a wonderful presentation. As Elliot was mentioning, valuable links, we added some valuable links to the end of this presentation, as this presentation has been recorded, and we will be sending you a copy of the recording and also a copy of the PowerPoint. We actually just had a participant post in the chat box that there was a New York Times article about smart home devices that can enhance independence for people with disabilities. So I'll add that to the valuable link. Thank you so much for sharing that. So be sure to check out these links when we email over the content to you. Before we open the floor to any questions, I'd be remiss if I did not thank our collaborators today, the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living, the Brain Injury Association of Michigan. We really appreciate you joining us and bringing this wonderful content. This is such a valuable topic right now, and we're just very, very grateful for your collaboration. And I also want to just mention again that this was funded in part by the Great Lakes ADA Center, and we are certainly appreciative of their funding. And I just want to give Robin Bennett another shout out. She put together this presentation and really, I think, drew from a lot of personal experiences in putting the content together. And thank you, Robin. You've just done a great job. And we just are so happy that you're on our team and for everything you do for people with disabilities. Thank you to all of you that joined. It makes us so happy to see people join and be a part of this dialogue. At this point, I just want to open up to questions. You can feel free, if you're more comfortable, to unmute your microphone and just shout out, or if you want to put questions in the chat box. Either way, we'd love to answer any questions you may have.
Hi, Jackie. This is Stephanie from the regional office. Hi, sweetie. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. I do have a question just really quickly. I saw some information about the smart home devices. Will the VA provide that type of equipment? I'm thinking like a ring system, whereas if the veteran can't get to the door to let someone that's delivering something to the house, will they be able to have that home smart devices that opens the door and let people in and that type of stuff? Is that what they're talking about when they say smart home devices? And will the VA actually pay for something like that?
Stephanie, this is Michael Harris.
Hi, Mike.
My answer to that would be yes. But, you know, the one thing I've learned over the last couple of days, I actually went to an expo out of Special Tree yesterday. It was for spinal cord injury and traumatic brain injury patients. And they had all these different vendors out there. And I'm coming across technology all the time that I'm not aware of. And I think technology is revolving completely. We're being introduced to new technology, it seems like daily.
Right.
And so when the VA becomes aware of it and it has a positive benefit for our members and really, you know, for veterans as a whole, then they're going to embrace it. And so I say the question to that is yes. And
Okay.
if you come across situations where veterans are denied technologies, then, you know, the old saying, you know, just, you know, bring it to our attention or bring it to the attention of the national office. And
absolutely.
I'm convinced that, you know, what's out there today isn't going to be there a year from now. It's just constantly evolving. And I'm blown away by the technology that's out there. I wish.
On my mic. I really am.
Yeah, the only way you find out about it is by going to these different events, and there's not as many as there used to be. You know, I call it the one-stop shopping. You know, like RIM used to put on an event at Cobalt years ago, and where you had like 100 vendors there.
Right.
And I ended up buying products because of that. But only way I learn about new technology now is through other people who are disabled and have benefited from it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. I figured they would probably have that eventually, but just seeing that someone put up an article about it. So I'm going to take a few moments and read it and see what all they are offering at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
If I could ask one quick question for Elliot, let's say hypothetically, I go into the Ann Arbor CIL and I want to, apply for the TAP program. Do I need financial information that proves my financial situation so I qualify? Do I need to bring that to you like you do under the Medicaid program? Or to get Medicaid, you got to provide bank statements to prove that you meet the $2,000 threshold?
No, not for our program. We do not. I'm sort of anti-means testing whenever it is appropriate to be so. We make the process very easy to apply. Essentially, we just ask folks to fill out our survey, and provide some information on how to deliver their device and what they need to make their device accessible to them. To that end, yes, we still do have tablets available if anyone in the audience is interested and qualifies in terms of, just to go over the qualifications one more time, because it's a little confusing, because we have two different grants. If you live in the Washtenaw area, Washtenaw County, and are over the age of 52, automatically qualify, or if you are over the age of 18, living in Washtenaw, Livingston, or Monroe, and have a disability. Again, we don't require proof of that, but we do ask that you self-identify as a person with disability. Then you can also get a tablet through us that way. One of the grants is coming to a close at the end of September. So if folks are interested in applying, you may shoot me an email as soon as possible. I will put it in the chat, as well as the number for the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living, and they can direct you to me and the other folks that work on this program as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. Did anyone else have any other questions?
This is Tom from the Ann Arbor CIL.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, hi to everybody, that especially the folks that I know. In one of the slides, and it may have been in others that I didn't catch, but I saw it labeled or typed as accessible technology versus assisted technology. And I wondered if we're using both terms, or if there's something I missed, or it was just called that because it kind of means the same thing. But I've always heard assistive technology, and I wonder if that's still kind of the thing to call it.
You know what, Tom? This is Robin.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if I did accidentally write assistive and accessible interchange, because I found myself doing that several times while I was creating this PowerPoint and going, oh, don't.
Yeah, it looks great.
Oh.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job, Robin. But
oh, you're right. Yep, it's right
thanks for
there.
the clarification, because obviously it is accessible technology as well.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of times terminology is evolving as you
Yes.
go along. And this might have been a term put out there 10, 15 years ago, but yeah, I see where you're coming from, Tom.
Cool. I'm glad that I tuned in for this. It's great info.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, I don't think I see anything else in the chat box. If not, our contact information is on these slides. As soon as Zoom is done downloading the recording, I will be emailing to all the participants the link so that you can rewatch or watch back. And I will also be converting this presentation to PDF to send out to you. Please keep us in mind for future presentations, or if you'd like us to share this presentation with you, your organization, please contact us with any questions. And stay tuned, because even though we fulfilled our grant through the Great Lakes ADA Center, which again, we're so appreciative for these funds, we do intend to keep these presentations going, these webinars, and at some point we hope to have some face-to-face as well. But we definitely feel that we're getting a lot out of this, and we hope that you are too. So also feel free to contact us if there are topics regarding the ADA or the disability community that you would like to see covered. We'd be happy to hear from you as well. I definitely want to thank our partners from the Brain Injury Association of Michigan and the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living, and all of our team here at Michigan MPVA. And thank you all for joining. We hope that you have a wonderful Labor Day next week, and we'll be emailing you all very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
so much, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.